Hello and welcome to the ICS Radio Hour, half hour with me, Eric Smith, and him, Dwayne Edwards. Dwayne, what do we want to talk about today?
Well, I saw you had a very interesting post based on Dale Dale's thing about AI the other day, and as always, we had a little discussion ahead of time, and I think you have some interesting but wrong-headed points we should talk about.
They are not interesting. They are completely correct, though. Look, I saw a post about AI and wanting to get papers for S4. They seem to be Tampa-based S4, which again I will note I'm very excited that it's in Tampa and not
Yeah.
Miami. But I won't get into that rant. But no, it's talking about AI and kind of maybe I guess the gist was disappointed in papers. Maybe some of them sounded very similar. They kind of kept harkening on the same thing. And I was thinking a lot about AI and like what we really need in the ICS security or just maybe the ICS world in general for AI. And look, what I think is, of course, funny about that is we've been talking about AI like things in automation world, in this ICS world for a very long time, right? GE talked about predicts, Lord, 2012, 2011. Like we were talking about some of these kind of AI like things. How do we improve production? How do we improve quality? All these things. But that's not really what I think we're going to talk about when we're talking about AI in terms of like the new world of generative AI. I kind of went back to Dale and I said, maybe what if the AI that we're thinking about and the AI that really will kind of move the ICS security world forward is actually pretty boring and not all that exciting, and maybe not something that somebody wants to necessarily watch on stage. I probably let other people argue better for me because I don't know the tech as well as other people. But what I can imagine when I and you and a bunch of people talk to people who are kind of trying to do it, first of all, you got very few people in organizations that are doing ICS security alone, period. There's teams of one, teams of two. Maybe you get like little teams of people over multiple things. There's very few organizations that have a whole team dedicated to this, right? So in that world, what are we making AI useful for? Hey, I want to speed up my work. I want to make it more useful to lots of people. I want to be able to push and pull out programs much quicker, especially in this kind of generative AI thing. So when I look at AI, I think of that as things like automating checklists on doing projects. It's figuring out how things are actually working on a day-to-day basis. Like, how do we make what we've got better? But, and I think this is where you'll contend a little differently with me. I think we have to do that on net new things going forward, like versus maybe looking back. It's very hard to go back into a world that was kind of uh, built already and go inject new things into that or change things that are already built. I think you should go forward and do it anew. And let's talk about that quickly. And then I'm going to talk about what I think AI might look like in my view of the world versus maybe what you think in your view of the world.
Yeah, that was a lot of words. So let's, at the high risk of playing professor here, I'm going to, right? So I think there's a lot of definitions and words that get munged around. I'm very nitpicky about words, so let's do this. Um, it's not that I would necessarily want to completely separate them or nitpick, but look, let's talk about machine learning, right? Because I think a lot of us would agree that we've gotten a lot of value out of machine learning over time, and that is there's some again crossover, but machine learning by and large is taking algorithms and just attaching them or letting them attack large bits of data, right? Large data lakes, whatever you want to say, and deriving value out of seeing patterns that are hard, if not impossible, for us as people to ingest and find the patterns. So, I think that has been well known. You talk about predicts, right? I worked on a predictive maintenance system. Boy, I'm trying to think how long ago. It was definitely over 25 years ago for the failure of transformers. You look at the viscosity of oil, the dissolved gas, temperature swings based on different stuff, right? And you could do a halfway decent job of predictive maintenance even that long ago on those. And so again, that's looking at patterns, but it's looking at patterns of things that you have large databases about, right? Whether that's in people's heads because you just know how those transformers act, or you start building that database. And I'm going to contend differently than you is that, hey, okay, I'll agree a little bit that you should probably do that on net new stuff, but A, you don't have the data, right, on net new. And more importantly, go look at the installed base of anything in manufacturing environments, electric utilities, whatever. That's all been in place for a very long time, and it's going to be a very long time before any of it gets refreshed. So I'm going to contend differently than you, and I'm going to tell you that, quite frankly, the value here is is updating and getting more secure and probably more efficient, even at the same time, how these systems work.
Fair. So I think that's a good argument. I think we'll talk about that. So let me think about my world of what I think generative AI or just AI in general would be very useful for OT. And here was my wonderful world of boring AI. Hey, I've got a scope of work. I've got a bill of materials of things I'm building on a new donut line. We'll do whatever. I don't know what we'll call it. Dough line. I've got X number of PLCs. I've got a Cisco switch. I've got a firewall. I've got whatever, right? I've got these pieces of machinery. Maybe I shove that list, that bill of materials, and maybe a couple of drawings and some other things into the model, right? And I say, hey, I want to make sure that this model hits these points. You know, hey, it only, communications, there's alerts or alarms or there's blockage of traffic that's not normal, out of a certain amount of time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, going down the list. Okay, the AI that I'm imagining spits out a list that says, here's your FAT, here's your programming, here's your checklist to make sure that all of these things that you're doing on this project or on this install are actually going to meet the standards that my organization wants for OT cybersecurity. And I take that and I go design or build the new machine, right? And I get it in and I FAT it and I make sure checklist by checklist, all the things that I'm doing, or hey, maybe the AI even programs it for me and does all that cool stuff. That's amazing. It saves time, it saves effort, it saves money. And by the way, we then know as we're going forward, we're also getting people used to what the new standards are, what the requirements are, and how we should be doing things in the right way. And then we take that out and then we do that again and again and again. And it gets people used to working on these standards. And I think that is how we, one, start using AI in the most effective way, and secondarily, get people used to working with AI in a way that's known and reliable and moves an organization forward much faster than going fixing a bunch of stuff in the past. Thoughts?
Okay. I won't argue that that doesn't sound interesting and maybe even valuable, but here's how I look at it. I'm a multinational company. I'm going to build one factory around the globe a year, or probably even less. Again, I've got 200, 300, 400 factories already running. And what I want to do is getting the most bang for my buck. So I'm going to feed in not the the skinny little bits of data that you just talked about that are very vague. I'm going to say, look, here's a factory I have, and it's of the fleet of factories that I have, it's right in the middle, right? It's not the best one I have because that one's maybe newer. It's not the worst one because that one hasn't had investment or for whatever reason. It's a mid performer, and I'm going to feed in not only the things you just said, but I'm going to feed in the existing ladder logic. I'm going to feed in the configuration of the routers, the switches, the firewalls. If I could somehow figure out how to even put in some of the day-to-day processes that are happening in that factory, great. If I've got tribal knowledge that I can somehow quantify and feed into that. And what I want to do is say, not only, hey, here's like the best things that you can do, but also give me a prioritized list by feeding in information about these are sort of the things that are going to cost. These are cost things that we may need to do to make improvements, but then also operationally over a 3, 5, 10 year timeline horizon, what is the amount of money you're going to save? And I think the hardest thing for most of the people that we collectively have sold to or done as practitioners, depending on your role in the world, is you need to predict the FTEs. You need to predict how many people are going to need to run this system. And look, being in sales, that was the thing we A, didn't know, and B, didn't want to talk about, right? Hey, you got to hire a guy to run this monstrosity. And yeah, it'll save you a whole lot of money, but you also have to spend money. And then you get into that whole psychology of economics. That's a whole different topic. But I would contend to you is A, there's so many more of those. That data is to some degree already there, right? Because you've been running that plant for how many years? And therefore I'm going to have a repeatable process that I can do over and over and over. Once I trust the process, once I trust the machine, once I trust what we're doing, I can roll that out and fix 300 plants. What you want to do is fix one plant and then wait 10 years to build another one.
I think that is mischaracterizing what I said, but I think that it's very, very hard to make change in organizations. We all know that no matter what. Like that's not a question. And where does that change really come? Is that engineering change? No. People are engineers. They think of the most efficient way to do things. Maybe there's arguments against the most efficient way, or maybe there's reasons why the most efficient way won't work. But everyone can agree there's an efficient way to do things and the right way to do things. The problem is when you get people involved on the other end of the thing, and people have opinions and people have ways of doing things and people have comfort levels. That's the hard part of doing something kind of brownfield or fixing things that are old first and going after that value, because you run into the hard part, which is the people part. And then people don't always trust what they're being told in terms of the model. Well, that was designed by the AI. How can I trust it? I've been in this factory for 25 years and I know what I'm doing, right? I know how this machine works. And I know that vibration over there means this to that piece of that piece of machinery. And how can that thing know what I was doing? Versus, hey, here's the checklist. It was created by this system, by the way, and we're going to do this on this new project. And let's use this as both an opportunity to understand how this thing works, right? We're going to know based on engineering processes that this is the right way to do it. And we're all going to get used to doing it on this way. And by the way, we'll take some of that learning and actually we should actually go do some of the stuff back in the field. But I think it's a much easier way, much easier from an organizational change and organizational productivity standard to take the idea of doing it right the first time and building it right the first time and then learning and taking those learnings back into the organization than the reverse way of building from behind and then maybe building new.
What did you say when I last shut up, that I was mischaracterizing your comments? Now,
Yes.
look, now you're taking it into the process and a lot of things I didn't talk about. I'm not saying we need to subvert the knowledge base of people who actually run the processes and the systems. We're talking about ICS security here, in which, quite frankly, most of the people we've had this on other programs is, most people who are automation controls engineers aren't really all that interested in security or making things more secure, right? And yes, there's the age-old argument between sort of security and engineering, but the point I'm trying to make here is around how do you prioritize these spends and these fixes? And I guess the other thing that I'm going to modify my argument based on a couple things you just said is, how do you engage in a meaningful way the people that are running the system? I'm not talking about the engineers, I'm talking about the operators. And I'll give you a quick story. Years ago, I was involved with a company that they were running out of space, right? They had CNC machines all over the place. They were running out of space. And so they had a very large investment to make, where they basically were going to have to buy some more land and construct, more room. And so before they did that, and there's no AI here, right? But I think this is a great use case. To your point, they said, okay, what else can we do? How else can we make this more efficient? And they sat down with the operators and they looked at what they were doing. I'll just tell you a couple quick things. One of them was over the years in the pursuit of debugging different processes, the programmers had put a bunch of manual stops into the machines, into the running of it. So, you cut the head off the thing, do some milling, and it would stop. And they had put that stop in order to see what was, read some variables. And the operator would have to walk by and hit the go button again. And so a lot of these had built up over time, and they had just never removed them. Okay, well, that's a simple thing. But if you look at something like AI, if you're talking about improving process, then that's something that isn't going to be done brand new. It's going to be done against older stuff, right? Or, hey, I got a guy that walks around every day with a checklist and measures the coolant level in every CNC machine. And, whenever humans do repetitive tasks like that, they write in whatever the number was last, and they don't walk around the floor because, boy, that's boring. So we're looking at the boring things on one side, but in my world, we're looking at how do you stop and ingest a huge amount of data from a lot of disparate things, right? How do you re-engineer the security or the way things run or interact, or maybe even in some cases both? That's, that I think is an absolute great place for AI to be applied. And again, my constant argument back to you is that's a very target-rich environment that can give me these returns quickly and across a lot of disciplines.
Sure. Here'd be my question though. Don't we have systems that handle those? Shouldn't we have systems already that handle those already? The person that's walking around with a checklist that's writing the same temperature thing, there should be a system already in place if that's happening on a day-to-day basis. So I agree that
there should be a lot of things. There should be world peace, Eric.
This is the world of the AI versus the systems that we actually know how to get there. You can get a temperature. Guess what? You can use the thermocouple on that piece of equipment to get that temperature reading, and you probably should have done that.
Yeah, it'd be a level gauge, but okay.
Level, yeah, exactly. Whatever, right? You should have been getting that temperature. You should have been getting that level and that for a very, very long time if that was a critical part of your application. But there's nothing AI about that, right? This is about how do you take lots of information that's already being spit out and do something new and effective with it and decrease time that's spent, decrease money, increase productivity.
But so I mean, I absolutely agreed. I already talked about machine learning versus AI. The AI part in the magical and unicorn-ridden world that I just described is the part where AI mimics human learning, and it is iterative and whatever it is. But if we train a model and we can look at how do you design these things, how do you design a system or redesign an existing system to be more secure, right? That again, I would say, hey, if I go to a COO, right, Chief Operating Officer of a manufacturing company, say, hey, in your next, I know by the way, I've experienced this in the real world without AI. Hey, I want you to quit doing the dumb things you've been doing, and my background, network design and security. I want you to quit doing the things you've been doing for 50 years and start doing it the right way, because I'm an expert and I'm telling you that. Or 20 people might be an expert and telling you that. I can pretty much guarantee, based on empirical evidence, that's just as hard to do as what I'm describing. But what I'm describing, I can absolutely show a difference in results. You, in your world, if we're doing what you said, hey, it's a brand new system, of course it works better. In my world, it's, hey, here was this thing that was running okay and making some money. And, you talk about just missed in manufacturing. A 1% increase in productivity can be millions of dollars. A percentage increase in security, yeah, admittedly harder to measure, but I think you could look at that with an expert's eye afterwards and say, yeah, hey, this is the kind of things that a Rockwell or a Siemens or whoever is going to advise.
I guess here's the question I have on that, though. Again, with the context of an AI conversation, how many of those things that you're putting into the brownfield situation that we did not know about or we could not ascertain by just looking at it and studying it today, yesterday, a month ago, 6 months ago, 6 years ago, 60 years ago? We probably could have figured all those things out along the process. And then why didn't we do it?
Well, I mean, you could use that argument about what you're describing or prescribing as well. I mean, absolutely. Is it something we could do? Yes. Is it something, though, if I could say, hey, come in and do this, and this is part and parcel, I presume, of the AI promise, right? And look, I'm no AI expert by any means. I'm sure that's becoming
Neither of us are.
I'm sure that has become exceedingly clear based on the junk that we're spewing. But if I understand anything at all about it, it's how do I speed up, or how do I make some things that may not be viewed as repetitive kinds of processes today, but really could be. So how can I ingest a lot of different facts? Here's what the firmware is. Here's what this is. Here's what that is. And predict. And look, I know there's going to have to be experimentation done, but I feel confident that whether it's a person doing it, to your point, or some machine learning / AI thing doing it, if I can feed that data in and get something spit out and do it 2 or 3 or 4 times that proves it works, then I can easily continue to do it. And I suspect on one end of that spectrum, where you've brought in security people, networking people, controls engineers, whoever else, physical, moving crap around the floor people, and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, on the other end of that spectrum is, okay, I'm going to prioritize the things you should spend money. So yeah, there's improvements down here that aren't going to give you anything. But here, and this is, I think, where we get into arguments and strife like you were describing, but up here are the top 10 things you can do that are really going to make a difference, both in security, again, as a prioritization, but maybe also looking at things that might also improve productivity. And so can that be done today? Yes. Is it done because it generates a better return than the cost, or are there other reasons why it doesn't get done? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's the argument I'm trying to make or disprove, but I am saying that prioritization is king.
Yeah, and I would say, and I think all those points are like super valid. I think the issue is the impetus to action, right? And the impetus to action is the hard thing, right? Getting somebody to
I
go do
wanted to
something
have
is
an
the hard part.
argument today. I'm not going to
I
argue
know.
about whether people do or don't do the nonsense I spout.
That's
I'm
right.
talking about I'm talking about why you're wrong and I'm right. Not about not not about whether anybody's going to do the dumb things I propose.
I just think that you can actually do something on a new greenfield project, and you're actually going to use it, and you're actually going to get comfortable with it and understand what's going on. When you have impetus to action to build the new, cool, exciting, sexy, fun, fast, shiny thing.
I'm certainly now that I've kind of thrown the gauntlet down, I think I am interested enough in this to see if there's some large language models, or if there's some things we could feed some subset of this giant set of data that I just proposed, and see if anything meaningful can be spit out. Quite frankly, again, I'm kind of talking out my rear end here. But it's an interesting.
But let's see. Yeah, look, I think we.
I've made up an interesting theory, and now I guess I have to go prove it or disprove it.
Maybe we'll do that on an upcoming episode. I don't think either of us are going to change either's mind. I think that was great conversation, though, and I think we should. I think maybe TBD on this one. We should go try and see what we can actually get out of some of these models. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but let's see on a
Yeah.
future episode.
Well, as usual, you've wasted a perfectly good half hour listening to Eric and I rant and rave about something. If you know anything about AI, unlike the two of us, please give us
Please
some
come
comments.
on.
Yeah, we'd love to have an episode where you actually talk some sense into us. Comment below. as everybody says, and we'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. So yeah, carry on. Have a good day.